As you're muted, brother, I don't know what's going on, my man. You
Oh,
wanna.
I just totally ruined that, man. I said, do you see how I stopped at midterm to tune you into the now? Because you see that? You see how I did that? Oh, man, that totally ruined it. I can't believe I was on mute. Shit. Okay. Morning, buddy.
Good morning, man. Happy Friday, brother. Happy Friday. What's
I
going
just
on?
had a whole conversation with myself. I think
Hey, man, it's not the first and not the last, right? But it's one
hey,
of those days, man.
it always answers the way I want him to. You know, when I talk to myself, it's crazy. It's
Yeah, my doctor said to come see him when I start talking back to that inner voice. So when you start actually having that conversation, it's like, okay, all right, it's time to see me at that point.
So
So
you've never had that conversation. You've never talked back.
well,
I talk
well, the
back
other
all
voice
the
is
time.
saying not to go see the doctor, right? So it's one of those.
So Ryan, I got this chapter from the last chapter was a little bit. I had to go over it a million times in order to semi figure it out, and I still don't. I'm going to go back to it after the book because it's one of those chapters that still kind of keeps in here. How'd you like this chapter? Chapter 6.
I loved it because when I read it, for those who's watching for the very first time, what we do is Book Club Fridays. Today we're going through Chapter 6 of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And this one was really entitled, basically dissolving the pain body, or like the inner body, and things like that. So let me talk about before I read it. When I saw the title, I thought it was going to be like, okay, we've been talking spiritual stuff so far. So we're going to get to the actual physical body, like our physical body, our eyes, our skin, our hands, our feet and stuff like that. And boy, was I wrong. It was something that the first thing that really stuck out to me, Dan, was like understanding the pain body and what that actually is. And, going into the nature of the pain body, explain how it feels on negative thoughts, emotions, experience from the past. And then it really made me realize that anytime I kind of get bad news, I always get that sick feeling in my stomach. Or I remember when early in my career, when I used to talk to customers and I knew it was going to be bad, and I would just kind of feel that, like, it would kind of be that emotion, is kind of like for me going on a roller coaster. I don't do roller coasters, but the reason is because like I get that like butterflies in the stomach, but it's not a good feeling. It's a very queasy feeling. And
Are you talking
understanding
about
that,
like that feeling when you haven't done your homework on a Sunday night as a kid?
and then your dog ate the homework, and you don't have a dog.
You have to submit it Monday morning, and you haven't done it, and it's like there's no chance it's getting like. You mean that?
No chance. And you could always say,
like,
the printer ink ran out, or like you said, your
yeah,
dog's homework, your dog ate it, but you don't even have a dog. Yeah, no, it's definitely like the same feeling. And I think
yeah.
when we attach it to that, and I think when I look at, like you said, the negative thoughts, the emotions and experiences from the past, I'm guilty of that. I think we all are guilty of that to an extent. And this chapter has really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I start to think about, maybe there's some people that I haven't been so nice to, or like, I've kind of disregarded their feelings and things like that. And I've kind of like made it a point, like, now, like, you know what, not going to bring in any more negative energy. I think energy is transferable into everything. So as positive as you see, like I went out with a friend last night. He's like, one of the things that drew me to you was your smile and stuff like that. And I do give a really good face, but at the end of the day, there is part of me, like I said, the ego that I'm working on. So from now on, Dan, and I want you to hold me accountable to this, and the audience as well, like no bad thoughts, no anything. We don't gossip, so that's not what we divulge in. But you know what? Just keep it positive all the time, because at the end of the day, like we say, energy is transferable. So understand the pain body was one of the things that I really liked about this chapter. Daniel, what did you kind of take away from this?
So I love this because, again, we're both getting different things out of it, right? The first thing that hit me was, I think, like the second sentence into the chapter when they were talking about being. And he says, no. Mind will always try to squeeze things into little boxes and the meaning of it, like the words into little boxes and the meaning of it. He's like, you can't, because you'll never get past that. And I was like, wow. Yeah. Because like everything is like, okay, even to the point where we say everything happens for a reason. That's putting it into a box.
Yeah.
Right. Because now it's like, well, what's the reason in the box, and what, but it's just being, he says, don't get stuck on the level of words, on the level of words. A word is no more than a meaning to an emotion.
Ooh,
a meaning to an emotion. And it's like, I was like, wow.
Repeat that again, man. That was deep, man. Repeat. You know how the mic dropped yesterday? This is like a repeat. Well, I don't know. We got to figure it out. Like
Yeah.
wind. Whoop, 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 whoop.
Yeah.
That again. That was
So we'll go. Word is no more than a meaning to an emotion. And, it's like they were talking about the word sin. And one of the narrators, and I don't know about the book, but the audiobook, it's a lady. And she says, well, I don't like that word sin, as if like I've done something wrong. He says, no. You're still attaching the mind, and it's the egoic mind, is still attaching a meaning to that word. Replace it with anything. He says, in any of these words, you can replace with anything. Like if it's God, replace it with whatever, the universe, or replace, you know what I mean? Like spirituality. He says it's all just words are these made up emotions in our mind. Somebody calls you an asshole, it's a word. Yeah. And it sparks this emotion like, no, I'm not. I treat people well. I'm not a jerk. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's the egoic mind. And he says like, and one other thing that really hit me, we'll get into dislike words, but one of the other things that really hit me that I found, and probably this week more than ever, because I was back at the hospital, back in the waiting rooms, back sitting with, 20, 30 people in a room, where he says, try when you're waiting or sitting in traffic, try going inside, right? He says like, and be in the now. And he says, and furthermore, you're going to enjoy it waiting. It'll make it more enjoyable. And how many times do we wait in a day? And how many times do we just mindlessly wander? Yeah. Whether it be scrolling through our phone, kind of looking and not going at the perfect time to go inside. And as simple as he said, some of the last words in the book that he talked about when he talked about breathing, or last words in the chapter, not in the book. That's I've got 7 or 8 other things, but what else do you got going?
Yeah, no, I think, well, first and foremost, I thought that was deep. Like that was amazing. And I love that I didn't actually take that part in. For me, it was
that's what I'm saying is like,
yeah.
we're taking so many different parts, but we're so connected mentally that it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. Hold on. That connects to that. And that connects to that. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think the one thing that I kind of really took away as well from this is like, the body is kind of like, everything's kind of like an illusion itself. It's like, you are not your body, you have a body, you are not it physically, so like, even with like, when it comes to pain, but it says here, this was on page 116, where it says like, do not fight against the body, for in doing, you are fighting it against your own reality. You are the body. The body that you can see and touch is a thin illusionary veil. Underneath it lies an inner visible body, the doorway into being, into life unmanifested. And the reason why this hit me so much is because of my faith. I'm Hindu, and we believe that, like reincarnation, like it's our soul. That's what truly, like when we die, our soul leaves our body. That's why like no one like gets up at a funeral or something like that. That'd be pretty creepy, right? But for us, it's like the soul itself, and we call it the Atma and things like that. But that's what I truly believe. I always kind of say this, I don't believe in any coincidences in life. So within my faith, I was like, even me and you, I'm like, this is not a coincidence that you and I met at the same time that we met. And then we've developed like this friendship and then things like that. Or people that, even one-off people that I've met, I'm like, I know you from somewhere. It's definitely not from this this lifetime. So when I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, well, even my body, there's a reason why we physically can't see our nose, right? Unless we're looking in the mirror, right? And then I'm thinking about the other things that we can't see and things like that, like, can't see your back, you can't see anything. So these are whatever. Like, how many times then have you like cut yourself and you're like, you didn't realize that cut until you like look down or look at your hands or something, and you're like, oh shit, I'm bleeding, right? So even that is a little bit of an illusion, right? Because then you're like, oh my god, like I'm in pain now, I need to go put a band-aid on. And you kind of, like you were saying before, so
good
for
point.
Me, right? And I think that for me is like understanding that, it's really within, everything comes within. And when we're talking about the first thing about like the negative emotions and stuff like that, like you've really got to feed it. And I've taken, I'm gonna shout you out here, but I've got a bunch of tattoos and they're all like religious based. So I literally took that you are your own temple. I mean, your body is your temple or whatever, literally to my end. And I know you got some amazing work that you got on too, but here's what's gonna happen with you with your ink, Dan. you're going to be looking at it, all that stuff for the first like couple weeks or something like that, and then you're going to completely forget about it. And that's how I relate that from this chapter, because I have 26 tattoos, Dan, and no point of a time I'm like, oh my God, like this is such a cool tattoo and stuff like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I forget that I have a back tattoo or a chest tattoo. It just becomes a part of my being every single day.
I like that. You mentioned a few things that are pretty key there. There's a reason why I got this tattoo that comes over the top of my wrist. And I specifically wanted a little piece over the top of my wrist because, it might go away in the future. It's only because it's still only a couple of months. But every time I see that top, it reminds me to go all in. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how many times I thought this was dirt. Like 2 weeks after I got it, I'm like, what the hell did I hit? I'm like, oh, never mind. And
it's
so
just my tattoo.
Yeah, but it's like, it to me, that is like the kind of trigger. Do you know what I mean? And it's but I see what you mean, that because with everything, I think over time, it, for lack of a better term, settles in. If that makes sense.
Well, I was just gonna say your trigger. This is your trigger right now, but let's call it spade a spade. It's not going to be your trigger in the future. It's not going to be a trigger. You're just going to be like, hey, this is just a part of me and things like that, right? It's just like, let me give you a great example with that. Is like, remember back in the day when we didn't have like these HD TVs, we turn on like those tube TVs and it would always be on like channel 3. Like no matter what, as soon as you turn on the TV, channel 3, even though if you watched a movie or something like that or a different channel the night before. And I think that's about the reset of life. Every morning we get that opportunity to kind of look at it and be like, okay, like how can I reset my life and like do the activities? If you want to do affirmations, you want to go for a walk, you want to do all these things, but there's going to be certain things we talk about, like doing those triggers, but your triggers are going to change over time. Even myself right now, like, like I don't drink, I intermittent fast now. So like, I don't even think about breakfast, like, but when I used to think of my triggers, like, oh my God, breakfast, eggs, bacon, avocado, all these things. Now that is completely wiped out. And that's my next trigger. And who knows, maybe in 6 months, I'll start eating breakfast again. Right. So it's just like for understanding that, none of this stuff is real, if that makes sense, around us. What truly is real to me, that believes, is the emotions that we feel, the conversations that we have with people, the way that we make people feel after they've had a conversation with us, and kind of just being a good person. And, when we let these things kind of dwell, I want to share a quick story with you. On Saturday, on the weekend, my wife and I, we went, Monday was a holiday. We went to grocery shopping because the Asian groceries are open. And then we're like, hey, we want some Indian sweets. So we actually stopped off into the Indian sweets place. And my wife and I were first, and then full transparency, like these two guys came behind us and they literally cut in front of us, and they saw us get out of the car. They parked late and stuff like that. And at that time I was extremely angry. Like my wife and I, we looked at each other, and I actually said something like, I was like, no, there's no way that this is going to happen. Like, why would you do that? Where's your common sense? And then all these negative thoughts started to fill my brain. I was like, who is this person right now? Is this an illusion in my head right now? Because I started thinking things about that weren't so nice, like, for transparency. So am I going to let that one action dictate the way that I feel for that whole day? So I came home, and obviously, like, I was negative. I am human at the end of the day, but then understanding that I'm not going to let that sit rent free in my brain. Like I mentioned it now for the first time here, and then I forgot about it. So it's like for us, when it kind of coming down to, Dan, as you kind of mentioned, when you got that trigger, and it's, you could have different future triggers. Like I mentioned last week, you had the note, to kind of slow down and things like that. What are you kind of learning? What is something that you're kind of taking into effect that might not necessarily be a trigger to remind yourself, but you're doing stuff and you're like, holy shit, like this book is really affected me. Like I'm actually learning from this and actually applying it without any triggers. You're like, have you had any of those moments?
Yeah. Because for me, some of those triggers are like a week or two that they last, and then they become a habit. So like when we were sitting waiting at the hospital this week, I started to pay attention to, started with my feet, moved to my knees, moved to my hips, moved to my stomach, and just really started feeling inside. And yes. And I actually started thinking about, I went to go see Deepak Chopra a couple of years ago, and he walked the audience through a meditation. And it was a meditation where he goes, just feel the tip of your fingers and focus on the tip of your fingers. And he goes, and the tips of your fingers are going to get hot, and you're going to feel the blood pulsing through them. And so I started to do that. And it's funny because I made it a point, like I make it a point to Thursday and Friday read the chapter we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Is it because I want it to be so fresh and like right there that it's not written down and I'm trying to regurgitate it in my mind about the feelings that I had when I read it. And usually the last thing I do before we get on Friday mornings is I go over the chapter again at two times the speed, and I listen to it, and I just kind of close my eyes and I listen to it, and I look at my notes and I say, yeah, okay, nothing else is or something else has hit me, and I kind of change things, delete things.
Yeah.
And so what I'm noticing is like being in traffic, being cut off, having that person in front of you doing what they did to you and Cash on the weekend. I think it's a test.
Yes.
And I think the universe puts these people in our way to test us. It says, okay, you're looking to get better. You're looking to be more, do more, achieve more, become more aware, become more inner focused, become less egoic, become all of these things. So I'm going to throw this out to you every now and then. Like even to the point where we got a road by our house at 60. Somebody was going 40 up it. And normally I'd be like, come on. And I was just like, there's a reason this person was put in front of me.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Am I going to try and there's cars coming constantly the other way. So I'm going to try and get out and like kind of sneak in, or do I just, okay, it takes me an extra 45 seconds. Cause literally that's probably what it was, an extra minute and a half of my day.
And what is
to
that
go
minute?
behind this person? I'm like, well, I save fuel. It's a big one. And I can maybe hear one more song. And, that would probably for me be some of the biggest impact that this book has had on me so far. And I would say to you, Ryan, and I would challenge you to think of that next time.
I think so.
Why was it?
Yeah, and here's the thing too. It brings up a great point as well too, Dan. Like I definitely will. Like I definitely will, and I like the things that you just said. But it comes to a point, Dan. Like, if you let those things happen, like I really feel there's a fine line between respect and like being a pushover, right? So
Yes.
I like my intention in this book, like even reading this book and all this stuff, like I'll never be a pushover, right? People will never walk over me, right? So I think in a kind way or something like that, I can say it like that, or not let. Here's what maybe I'll challenge myself to do, Dan, is not let the negative thoughts like come in. As it comes in, it goes. And then I kind of just say, hey man, you cut in front of me, and just let it be, just leave it alone. I think that's what I'm going to do going forward. Not to be like, hey man, go ahead. Maybe you got a busier day than me. Like, I don't like when people think that they're more important than somebody. I just think that that's just a lack of respect and honesty. And Dan, when you're talking about like scanning yourself at the hospital and the Deepak Chopra meditation, anybody who does Headspace out there, which is a guided meditation app, probably one of the best in the world. One of their first activities, Dan, and anybody, you could go download it and do like 10 free, unlimited. It's a course, 10 for, and then you could pay for it. But anyways, the first session of learning is called the body scan. So they'll have you like literally close your eyes and like you're going through your body. Start from the top of your head. How does that feel? Okay, now go to your eyes. How do you feel? Go to your tips, like your fingers and all that stuff. And you work your way down. And, that's where I feel like growth is, instead of like going to sit there and trying to like clear your mind, especially if you're a complete beginner. I talk with a lot of friends, and the aim of meditation is not to clear the mind. It really isn't. It really is. I said this a million times, but it really is to be like you're on the side of a highway and you're watching each car. Each car represents a thought, and you're just letting them go by. And that's what to me meditation looks like. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with you. I've talked to myself that I'm going to do that. But like I said, I'm not going to be a pushover, because that's not who I am. I don't think anybody should be a pushover. I just think like, hey, take those negative thoughts, and just like it's energy, just let it go. Say what you got to say in a nice way, and then go on about your day. You don't need to mention it anymore.
And Ryan, you can even go, that might be challenging for you at the start.
Yeah.
Right. Because of that belief of not being a pushover. I've come to understand it like this. If when you got home and you were still frustrated with that happening to you and Cash, you allowed those people to control your day unconsciously. They went along with their day, never even thinking twice about what they did to you, how they did it, why they did it, because they were unconscious about doing it in the first place. Right? It's like getting cut off. So you're here, and the guy like comes out around you, speeds up to cut right back in front of you to cut off the off ramp.
Yeah.
Like instead of just staying here and cutting off. And many times that's pissed me off. And, you know, one thing is allowing it to continue because they actually control your life over you.
Well, they live rent
in
free
that moment.
They live rent free in your mind, right?
head.
Yeah, and that's the one thing we didn't think about it. Like we didn't dwell on it too much, but like it's like a conversation to have, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, when we kind of see everyone, you know, it's weird to kind of like think about those things because like you're like these things never really happen, right? So it's just like that one off. Like okay, if this is the one off, you know, like even when you get cut off, like do what you gotta do, honk, swear, whatever, and then you're gone. You know, that's it. You know, it is what it is from that point.
Well, it
But
brings us to like this, and I don't know if you caught this. It was like the last two sentences of the chapter.
Yeah.
Where he says, most people don't know how to listen because their time is taken up by thinking. They pay more attention to that than what the other person is saying. And I often heard people say, you know, when somebody's talking, you're formulating the response.
You're listening to react. You're not actually truly listening.
Yeah.
But Dan, I want to bring up something with that makes sense that a good friend told me.
Yeah.
You know, all these things, listening, waiting, like all these emotions, all these actions that we have and things like that. When you think about it, Dan, no one's actually taught us that. You know, like everything is taught from our parents and like teachers and stuff like that. But if you think about our parents, like your parents would be like, hey, make sure you listen to this or be quiet or things like that. But they haven't told us like I know my parents and everybody's parents hasn't sat them and be like, okay, well, this is the reason why I want you to do this. Or like, you know, here's how you listen to somebody. Here's how you have a conversation. You know, those soft skills that we feel like are just general and that we should automatically know. It's not as simple as that. You know, there's no awareness to it. So I encourage everybody to think about that. You know, even if you're a parent or anything like that, understand that, hey, if I'm telling my kid to like sit up straight, you know, tell them why, you know, and it's based off their own, not necessarily insecurities, it's based off of their environmental too, because their parents probably would have told them that as well when they're kids. So it's just that infinite loop that we always kind of talk about as well. Yeah. So when you're having a conversation, I make sure the eye contact is there, make sure I'm listening, put everything away, because at the end of the day, there's going to be something that you can learn from somebody. And, you know, nobody wants to go to lunch. Nobody wants to go grab a coffee with somebody who's just on their phone all the time. I turn my phone completely around and just be present in the moment. And that's what this book is. You know, it's all about being now there, because, you know, before we had cell phones, think about what our parents did. You know, so imagine we didn't have text message. Look at that too, right, Dan? Before text messaging, what was there? There was phone calls, right? And before phone calls, it was like walking down the street and having a conversation with somebody. So I'm interested to see what the next evolution is going to be. But think about pre-texting, like how did we have conversations with people?
Yeah, you know, Ryan, and it brings up another point. I mean, my son's okay with it, but my daughter more, because she's 2 years younger, so she grew up younger on a phone.
Yep.
It's like phone calls almost don't exist. It's like when you have to make a phone call somewhere, it's like, no, I don't want to. I'll send a text. And I'm like, no, you have to call. Like, and maybe I'm wrong, you know, like, because we grew up with, you have to speak to somebody. If there's an issue, you don't just text, you speak, you call somebody, you have a conversation. And nowadays, it's like, no, it would be like breaking, like when we were younger, it'd be like breaking up with your girlfriend on a voicemail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And it's like,
or MSN. Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody be like, what are you doing? Like, that is cowardly. But
yeah.
And maybe it's different. And, you know, maybe if there's a 20-something-year-old, 20, between 20 and 22 out there, or 24, share with us. Like, is that just normal these days? Because I think it's absolutely absurd. It'd be like, you know, firing a supplier over email. Give them the courtesy of a call. But maybe that's not what is today's acceptable. Like, I read a report, I guess probably 6 or 7 months ago. And it said that through this poll, they have said it's polite to text somebody, more polite to text somebody and say, do you have time for a call, than it is just to pick up the phone and call.
I believe that.
I believe that. Okay. Yeah. But I when did that change? Because we've always, like, if I wanted to call you, I just pick up the phone and call you.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Now I text you and I say, do you have a second? Or you text me and you say, do you have a second? But when did that change? And when did that become the new norm?
Yeah.
right?
It became like pattern interruptions, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, like here's the way I look at it. I do not sell. My first appointment is always email. I never make a phone call. And the reason I don't make a phone call is because I found when I'm soliciting CEOs, VP level, higher level people, they get back to me at night. And I know no matter what time I make a phone call, it's going to be inconvenient because everyone that calls me during the workday, it's inconvenient. Like, unless it's not focused on my 5 major moves, it's an inconvenience. But when are people supposed to call to drum up business? Right? Like, this is what I'm saying. So
you got to do it. It's a pattern interrupt. Like, you're going to interrupt somebody's days regardless. It's like, here's the thing too, right, Dan? It's like you're working from home and somebody rings your doorbell, whether it be like a service provider or even if it's mail, like the UPS driver. It's a pattern interrupt, right? So you're not wrong for either of those things. And I'm the same way too, Dan. Like, if I see a number that I don't recognize, I'll just wait and I'll just text them or like something like that. Be like, because it just, sometimes I just feel like we're so in that mindset of like, we get so many spam calls and like just the way that the world is right now, right? Like the world is not like, when my wife and I, Keisha and I decide to have kids and stuff like that, it's not the same the way that we grew up in terms of like, hey, go out and play hockey and come home when the light poles, when it goes off and things like that. It's different now, man. It's like you see all these like, and it's not to be scary or anything like that, but you see the news, like all these like kidnappings and different things and people and not so good people in the world. So as a parent, you want to shelter that. And I think even when it comes back to text messaging and things like that, it's just kind of like the safe way, the safe way to kind of like get something across, right? Or get that information, right? Like, I remember, Dan, when my dad used to work downtown and like my dad would like, my mom was working she was at home. She wasn't working. He would like call her all the time. Like even when we got home from school, he would call her and all that stuff. Now I think about my wife and I, we'll never call each other while we work. We're just shooting a text, we text back and forth a lot throughout the day, but I couldn't think of like, I feel like if my wife was to call me, my emotion right away, and it's great that we're talking about this chapter, the negative emotion would be like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? Like it's so out of the ordinary now, and sometimes when I get a phone call, sometimes like if I see my mom or my sister call at like 9, I'm like, oh my God, is everything okay? So I don't know when it did switch, but
as opposed to like a text, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Or when somebody texts your name, Ryan, like anytime my sister is like, Ryan, I'm like, what happened? I'm in the anticipation. But when it's like, yo, hey, or when they just text you like whatever they want, it's like, hey, you want to come over or whatever it is, then I'm like, okay, that's
or more than like a one word, and then 9 texts later they finish the sentence. You have any?
You just see the person typing. You just see like so and so's typing.
Your phone goes. There's a couple of people that I know that do that, and I'll kind of look and I'll see like the 2 words, and I'll just put my phone down.
Just wait for it to finish.
Go, why? What's going? I said, no, they got like 9 more texts coming in before they finish the sentence. It's like it's like they're texting the way we do subtitles, like 3 words and 3 words.
Captions. So awesome. I love that. So Dedo, let's go. Top 3 takeaways from this chapter, my friend.
Okay. Emotions when going into the body, accept them for what they are and move on. Right? Okay, that's the emotion I felt. Move on. The last one, people don't know how to listen because their time is taken up by thinking. Like, I'm paying such close attention to that. And here was one that I thought was pretty cool. And the next time I have it, I'm going to try it. When you feel worried or have anxiety, focus on your breathing. Deep breaths, feel the air come in, feel your lungs fill up, and feel the air exhaling from your body.
Sydney said yesterday too. Sydney said that when we were asking about, what different things, deep breaths, taking that breath work. So sometimes these signs, man, they come out through different avenues and different resources, and it's made for us to pay attention to them. And I think for me, those are amazing. I think for me, one of the biggest things I've learned in this is just understanding that, just the significance of presence. Just being fully present in the moment. I'm not going to be multitasking anymore. Even as down as to Dan, like not even having some background noise playing in the background. Like I'm going to be fully present. I did some courses yesterday. I was just fully present. I left my phone in the other room. There was no time for texting. I was just there taking notes and things like that. So I think just kind of
why you didn't get back to me all day. Okay. Now
I don't know if you've kind of noticed, but like, yeah, I've kind of like, and you know what too? Like I said that too. Like, I think, understand like our time is valuable. Like, so I'm actually picking times where like I decide to like respond to people and things like that.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
sorry that you're one of them included, but I'm like, it's just if I'm so indulgent, I don't want that pattern interrupt to take me away from it. And I just want to be fully
Yes.
immersed and fully present, right? So I do this with like every morning, like, and everybody who knows me, like, don't message me from 7 to 8 if you want something urgent, because that's like my prayer time. But like I'm starting to like realize like I'm gonna make this like for the full like 16 hours, like that I'm like fully present. Even at the gym, I'm gonna experiment with like not even taking my headphones or like my phone into the gym. Like I'll probably just pop it in the locker and just be fully present in the workout. I want to hear the muscles contracting. I want to hear, like, I want to see it, like even like the beads of sweat coming down and things like that. I just want to be so immersed in like what's going on now that I'm not thinking about the past, like, hey, did I lock the front door? Or I'm not thinking about the future, like, oh my God, what my protein shake is going to taste like and stuff like that. I just want to be fully immersed in doing this. That's why with this podcast and things like that, just here looking at the camera, having a conversation with you, that's the way to go. That's my big takeaway, at least.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway, brother. And you know what? That's the essence of what the book is trying to teach us.
Yeah.
Right. So you're grasping it already by probably chapter 3, 4, and 5. And now all these other chapters are just going to be a big kind of bonus dab of icing on the cake.
Oh, I love me some cake. I truly love this book.
Oh, I wish I could taste sugar, man. I guess it's a good thing and a bad thing. That's the only thing that has not come back is my
sweet tooth.
Well, I guess so. There's like it's on kind of like the mid tip of the tongue, if that makes sense, is where your sweet spot is. And mine hasn't come back, which is great because I have zero willpower when it comes to donuts. And now that they don't taste good, I just don't want them. So for me, that's kind of a good thing. Candy, chocolate, that like it was my kryptonite, man. Like no matter what, I could eat like a 40-ounce porterhouse steak, and somebody would say, "Do you want chocolate cake?" And I'm like, "Yep." And
you always gotta get dessert, man.
I need it.
Well, Hermosi says that, man. I know you don't follow him on Instagram, but Hermosi's big thing on Instagram is like never skip dessert. So every night he's posting his desserts and all that stuff and things like that. And it's funny. I love that you said that about like the tongue and things like that, because it just unlocked a childhood memory for me. So in grade 5, shout out to Miss Yates. I hope you're still alive. But Miss Yates, one of the projects that we did, Dan, was actually the tongue and splitting it out. So she actually made a cake version of the tongue and like had like different sections of like what's your sweet, what's your salty, and all that stuff. So now we're remembering the tongue cake from Miss Yates. So that was unlocking childhood memories here, man. This is
see
really
how
cool.
that happens, buddy. It's awesome. It's because you were paying attention to the words I was saying. You weren't thinking about what you were going to respond to.
Never.
And it allowed the ability for that memory to get relived.
Yeah. Well, speaking of memory, before we kind of shout out here, I want to give a big shout out to myself here. But today actually marks a year since I joined Sales Chatter, like the first episode that I did with you. You, Dean, Jeff. It was a data day that I joined in. I think we're actually talking about vertical farming. I saw it on my Facebook memories this morning. So just looking at everything, I'm actually posting a little reel right now. I created one this morning of like kind of like my journey on it, like kind of seeing the bad background to here, again, all the fancy things and everything like that. But shout out to everybody who's like starting a podcast or going after their dreams. This is a sales podcast as well. So shout out to everybody going after that customer, their ideal customer, because you're really one episode, you're really one thing away from getting what you truly want to get, as Dan always kind of preaches here on this show. So so shout out to that. I'm excited and looking forward to it's opened up so many doors already, and I've learned so much about myself. So I'm really looking forward to the next year, next 5, next 10. Let's get it.